For years, I have viewed the Apple Mac Mini as the black sheep to my purchasable options as a professional Mac user. I've locked in my work computing purchases to either a Mac Pro or a MacBook Pro since I was a film student in 2007. In one fell swoop, my perception of what a low-end Mac offering is supposed to be has been altered thanks to the 2020 Mac Mini. Without beating around the bush, there is no denying that everything that I experienced using this Mac since launch is a result of Apple transitioning away from Intel processors to their own in-house M1 chip. After all, there are no significant rational alterations with what we've come to expect from the Mac Mini other than the brains of the operation taking another form. The housing of the 2020 Mac Mini is essentially identical to the last generation Mini. The ports are where the physical differences of the product begin to diverge. In my opinion, it's a bit of a downgrade even though the ports are updated with the newest technology. Let me elaborate on this. On the rear side of the M1 Mac Mini lie every single port and connection accessible to the computer. Apple supplies us with two Thunderbolt USB 4 ports, an Ethernet port, one HDMI 2.0 port, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and two USB-A ports. That's probably enough for general users to get by, but on the previous generation of the Mac Mini, there were four Thunderbolt ports available alongside everything else I listed on this current generation. Although they were Thunderbolt 3 instead of 4, as someone who relies on expandable storage for work, an additional two USB-C ports would have been extremely beneficial. I realize that's my unique workflow, but a mouse and keyboard already take up both available USB-A ports. A portable SSD for timelines and an external HD for files leaves no room for anything else. Of course, I do understand that on such a small computing body, we obviously can't expect equivalent ports on, say, something like a desktop computer. It's just that when the previous generation had that extra set of ports, I do envy the added flexibility. You can remedy some of the port issues by buying third-party docks. Some of them, like this Alexify Mac Mini dock, even give you added SSD storage. Every other technical thing on the Mac Mini, like Wi-Fi chip and Bluetooth speeds, are up to date as expected of a new Apple product. Small NUC kits or computers of this size aren't exactly rare nowadays. You see dozens of Windows and Chrome OS options out there for lower price points. What you are buying this particularly small computer for is an official entry ticket into Mac OS. It's been repeated for years now, but there really are people out there fully invested in the Apple ecosystem that have a difficult time breaking out of it. Whether that be reliance on Final Cut, Logic Pro, AirDrop, or even GarageBand, you can only access those applications officially on macOS. I've stated this in the past reviews, but after a decade of timelines starting on Final Cut Pro 7, I just find it more troublesome to leave than to continue on with what I'm familiar with. It's gotten even worse for me the more I've begun to rely on AirDrop in recent times. The competitors are beginning to implement similar things, but Apple has just been doing it so well for so long. I can't stress how effective my workflow has become because of something so simple like AirDrop. What made me take a look at the 2020 Mac Mini in the first place was one of two reasons. The first was the aforementioned reliance on AirDrop. I've had a two Mac setup since 2012 with a Mac Pro 4,1 planted at the office and some variation of a Mac Pro or MacBook for transportation usages. It's been an effective duo for my career and lifestyle, but time really does deteriorate functionality for tech devices. And although I did modify my 4,1 into a 5,1 with a Radeon RX 580 GPU and a 12-core CPU, I simply could not use the latest version of macOS without some sort of compromises, and that's why I turned my attention to the M1 Mac Mini when it launched to surprisingly enthusiastic benchmark results. The 8-core CPU developed specifically for macOS devices seems to display that trademark Apple hardware and software synergy. My model is the base model with only 8GB of RAM and 256GB of SSD, yet for many tasks I can vouch that it punches stronger than computers with beefier guts. The thing I'm interested about with the M1 chip is how effective it is even after integrating this GPU, CPU, and neural engine all together into one little chip. Apple says the M1 has 6 times faster graphics performance over previous Intel models with integrated graphics. I'm not going to pretend I fully comprehend the engineering differences between Apple's M1 chip and processors from companies like Intel, but from what I've experienced during my unique usage here, I wasn't let down by anything at all by this new proprietary chip. For comparison, the M1 Mac Mini at the $699 price point actually exports a 10-minute 4K timeline quicker than a 2018 2.3 GHz i5 MacBook Pro hooked up to a Radeon RX 580 GPU in an eGPU box. That combination cost me roughly $1,500 a few years back. And my old but now upgraded Mac Pro with its shiny new 27,000 plus multi-core score also seems to lag behind the M1 Mini when working through a Final Cut Pro 10 timeline. Yeah, I know I always say we don't really talk about benchmarks at the Sypnotix, instead focusing more on like everyday experiences and feel, but I thought I'd toss that Mac Pro number out there, seeing as I did bump it up myself with upgraded specs. Yes, the comparisons aren't perfect, seeing as both of these older devices purchased at full MSRP with additional modifications to boost performance, but the overall result of the product, which is your work, is all the same. For $699 in 2021, I'm able to accomplish things I was using computers north of $1,300 to do the same. As expected from new technology, everything isn't rosy and perfect though. During my first few weeks with the M1 Mac Mini, I encountered quite a few annoying bugs with the Apple proprietary software like Final Cut Pro and GarageBand. They went away after a few app updates, but with those updates also came another reactive blow to my workflow. Lots of my plugins, purchased once too, became incompatible with the new versions of the app running on the M1 processor. Some of these are also due to the new OS version, and others were because of the new processor compatibility. I reached out and talked to some of the developers, and some of them have acknowledged that they are working to update their work to be more effective on the new chips. After getting a chance to see the 2020 Mac Pro in all its glory, I'm still jealous of my colleagues who get to use those beautiful machines at their offices. I, however, as an independent contractor, settled for value per dollar, and I do think I made the right choice. With COVID-19 raging on, most of my work revolving around Apple Macs have dwindled down to YouTube videos and podcast work, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And for this reason, the Mac Mini will stay in my Mac rotation for the foreseeable future. That, of course, could change in an instant if Apple releases that fabled Mac Pro Mini circulating the internet. I might not be able to resist that one after getting a taste of the effectiveness of the M1 chip here on the Mac Mini. The other day, my house was leaking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do about this. I'm a tech guy. I only know tech, so how do I fix that? And then you subscribed and it fixed it, so thank you.